Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good, mate. Just saying before we started recording, there's a lot to talk about. You know, we've got the first pay-per-view of the year this weekend coming up. We've got the Fight Night card to break down, and obviously we've got fight news to look at as well. So it's going to be a busy one.
Yeah, there's actually so much to talk about. I'm not entirely sure where to start. Let's start with the Katie Taylor news. You had some Katie Taylor news reported on MMA Sucka last week. Tell us, the folks, what's happening with Katie Taylor.
Yeah, so obviously we know that she's like Kamaru Usman in MMA. She's almost lapping the field. You know, she's winning every round, she's winning every fight, and she's looking dominant. And you know, horizon. So it's exciting times, to be honest, for women's boxing.
Well, that's very good. Then that's very good to hear. So we got some news going on. I don't know where to start. I think let's start with Giga Chikadze and Calvin Kattar.
Yeah, sounds good. You know, it's what a fight to start off the year. To be honest, I thought it was an excellent fight. You know, I don't mean to brag, I was the only one out of the MMA Sucka Crew. 15 of us that picked Kattar to win. Everyone, you know, it's 14 picked Chikadze, but there's levels to this game. We spoke about it last week that Chikadze hasn't really, you know, he's fought an Edson Barboza, he's fought a Cub Swanson. If you compare that to Calvin Kattar, he's fought Jeremy Stevens, he's fought Renato Moicano. Yes, he went 25 minutes with Max Holloway, although he was battered in those 25 minutes. Clearly, it was a massive learning curve for him. And I thought he was absolutely phenomenal in this fight.
Yeah, and he did all the right things that you want to do against someone like Giga Chikadze. You want to crowd the kicker, give them no space to breathe. You're going to pressure on the exchanges, and that's what he did. And I think one thing that we saw in this fight, especially as the fight was getting longer, even towards the end of round two, especially in round three and onwards, is that Giga Chikadze is a little bit predictable in his striking. So he's an extremely good striker, but he focuses just a couple of things. So I was talking to Cody Gibson, who used to fight in the UFC. I was talking to him about this just last night, actually, and he was saying that at King's MMA, where Chikadze trains out of, they do a lot of hard sparring. And what happens when a lot of guys are doing hard sparring, Robbie Lawler talked about this as well, when you're doing hard sparring, you tend to just do what you're good at. So you'll find like two moves that you excel at, and then you do them over and over again. And Giga Chikadze is an example of this because he has, like, we know his moves. This is the body kick, the head kick. He does a 1-2, and he really overextends on the 1-2. Calvin Kattar saw it. By the round three, Calvin Kattar had figured it out. He'd figured out, like, oh, he overextends during the exchanges, and he won the fight. He did a really good job. He's back in the featherweight mix now, right?
Yeah, for sure. You know, his distance and his pressure won him this fight. It's how we spoke about it last week. He either wants to be all the way out, or all the way in, and you know, for the first round he was stuck in that middle ground until Chikadze slipped, and you know, Calvin Kattar was able to dominate on the floor. And I think, you know, the sweat of that takedown, although, you know, obviously in the first round it was a slip, but Chikadze knew that he was, after the first round, he was vastly outskilled on the floor. And you know, that was obviously playing in the back of his mind. You know, I can't fully open up because if Calvin Kattar does take me down, it's Calvin Kattar's round. And, you know, like you say, he just unpredictable. Yes, that body kick is one of the best strikes in MMA. You know, we've seen it flatten numerous people, but if that doesn't work, you know, if you crowd that kick, you land it with a sort of thigh, or it's more of a knee, and it's, you know, where do you go from there? The elbows of Calvin Kattar, you know, everyone's seen the pictures, brutal, and that's because he was all the way in. You can't land an elbow from you know, from range, really, unless it's sort of like a Superman elbow, as it were. But you know, the elbows that Calvin Kattar was landing was because he was almost chest to chest, that sort of Mexican boxing style with Giga Chikadze. And, you know, that's maybe the blueprint to beat Chikadze now. How back him up, crowd him, and don't allow him to get going. You know, Calvin Kattar almost allowed him to get going in that first round, where, let's be honest, Chikadze was winning the round for the first sort of 2.5 minutes before he threw that big strike and slipped. and then Kattar took over, and it was kind of one-sided from there on out. But like you say, Kattar's right back in the featherweight mix now with a win like that. It's who do we put him up against next? It's a difficult one because we've still got the upper. You got the Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, and as we sort of alluded to, it's probably going to be we alluded to it would probably be Chancellor Young, and obviously now it's confirmed that Zombie's getting the fight. But where does Calvin Kattar? Maybe a Brian Ortega coming off a title fight loss, but that seems like quite a big step up. Josh Emmett, I think, would be a good fight for Kattar. They're both sort of fringe top 4, top 3 guys, and Josh Emmett is deserving of a big fight. He beat Dan Ige last time out, but he's deserving of a big fight now, and that could easily headline a fight night card. And with the hard hitting style of Emmett, with the boxing style of Kattar, I'd certainly stay up to watch that. It sounds like a really good fight. And for Chikadze, it's difficult because where does he go from here? It's like we say, the blueprint's kind of there now for him. And I saw on Twitter someone suggest Shane Burgos. Now, that's a good fight, but Shane Burgos' gas tank isn't going to fail. And let's be honest, we saw Chikadze in round 3 struggling. He was struggling for stamina, to be honest, for cardio. And Shane Burgos, if I was Giga Chikadze, I'd maybe look for something else. Maybe look for an Arnold Allen who is an up and comer and definitely a respectable name in the featherweight division, who I could get a win over, but isn't well renowned for his gas tank like Shane Burgos.
Could you imagine a Calvin Kattar Josh Emmett fight? That is a fight of the year contender already. That is such a good one. What about the other guy kind of floating around in the featherweight top 5 is Yair Rodriguez. Is he a fair matchup for Calvin Kattar? The thing is with Yair is, yeah, probably, but how often does Yair Rodriguez fight? Is he healthy enough to fight? Is he healthy after his Max Holloway fight? Is he in any good shape? I don't even know. Do you do a Yair Brian Ortega 2 years from now when they're both ready to fight? Or what do you do with these guys who don't fight frequently enough but are still in the top 5? And we want to see them fight. They're awesome fighters.
Yeah, for sure. We don't know how good Yair Rodriguez truly is because he's so inconsistent with the amount that he does fight. Like you say, he had all that time off. He came back against Zombie. Didn't look great in that fight, to be honest. He was losing that fight until he won it. Although it sounds ridiculous, that elbow, I could put money in my lifetime will never land again. No one's landing that elbow again. And he was, like I say, he was losing that fight until he won it.
Yeah.
And then he goes in there against Jeremy Stevens. He has the odd sort of eye poke in the first 10 seconds of the fight and then wins by decision. And then, he goes the main event with Holloway, which is a phenomenal fight, don't get me wrong. But the questions have got to be asked, how much better could he have? Because he did very well against Holloway. There's moments in the fight where we thought, well, maybe Rodriguez is going to take over here. He was hitting Holloway with some big shots. We know Holloway's got one of the best chins in the game, but irrespective of that, how good could Rodriguez be if he was just more active? And it's the same with Brian Ortega. We saw him get battered by Holloway. He took, I think, a year and a half out, came back and looked phenomenal against Zombie. Then he was put in, for him, quite a short turnaround against Volkanovski, but it was still, a good 9 or 10 months. And we haven't heard any, since that fight. I can't remember when it was, but we haven't heard anything from Brian Ortega. No, that fight was back in September, and although that's not, it's not a massive time off, but we haven't heard any rumors. We haven't heard any, we haven't seen him on Twitter calling anybody out. We haven't seen, anything from Brian Ortega as far as fight news is concerned. Yes, of course, he's going to still be in the gym, honing his skills. But even this weekend, we saw Zombie and Giga go at each other online. It's disappointing if you're an Ortega fan, because at the end of the day, he's good. He's a very, very good, as we saw against Korean Zombie. Now, if Zombie beats Volkanovski, there's the argument that Brian Ortega could jump in there with Zombie, and he's got a win over the champion in 2 fights removed for Ortega. But then it's a hard sell because Max Holloway's on the outside, and I think Max Holloway beats Brian Ortega, 10 times, well, 9 times out of, no, 9.5 times out of 10 at least. So it's, I think it was a little bit stale featherweight when Aldo was champion because he was just running through everyone.
Yeah.
And we had the McGregor shake-up. We had slight dominance from Max Holloway, and now it's wide open at the moment. Alexander Volkanovski is dominating the field at the moment. He's got 2 title defenses, and one of those title defenses over the one of the featherweight goats in Holloway. But you got Ortega, Rodriguez, Zombie, Kattar now, Emmett, Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze. These guys. And then even sort of almost on the outside of that sort of title picture, you've got Bryce Mitchell, Edson Barboza, who are fighting in a few weeks' time.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Burger, Sadiq Youssef, I think he's announced a fight recently. Sadiq Youssef. So these are, it's an exciting time to be a featherweight because you want to be in that mix, and you want to be getting that sort of signature win that puts you straight back in the picture. At the end of the day, nobody really thought that Zombie would be getting the fight against Volkanovski when Holloway pulled out, but because he got the win last time out, he's straight in that title picture. He was straight in the title fight. If Zombie wins that, it throws up the division even more. It provides far more options for challenges, which is, it's what we want. We don't want the standard stale, right, this is the champion, its next contender's this. This is, I'm sure we'll talk about women's flyweight after Caitlin Chikadze got a good win, but what's the point? It's Valentina's a champion. She's going to be the champion until she doesn't want to be the champion anymore. So it's good to have multiple different contenders at 140.
It's a killer weight class. Everyone's jockeying to get into the top 3, and the top 3 is barely moving, but it's still an exciting weight class. Sadiq Youssef, like you said, I just quickly looked up Alex Caceres. Oh, it's kind of crazy. Alex Caceres, after all this time, is in the top 15 at featherweight. I think this is the highest ranked he's ever been in his career, and good for you, man. He's a chaotic fighter, and Sadiq Youssef also kind of a chaotic fighter. Either of those guys can win. Obviously, I think Sadiq Youssef gets it done. He's my boy. However, both are so inconsistent at times. What I mean?
Sure. Yeah, and Alex Caceres is on. I've just checked now. He's on a 5-fight winning streak. He hasn't lost since he lost to Krohn Gracie back in 2019. But if you kind of look at the names that he's beaten, it's no one sort of standout. He's beaten Chase Hooper, Stephen Peterson, Austin Springer, Kevin Krohn, who obviously stepped in on a couple of days' notice this weekend, and Sung Won Choi, which was a very good win last time out on the in October. But since then,
I know
it's a bit dicey. But the guy, he's been in the UFC since 2011. Who knew that? I can tell you for a fact that I didn't know that since he's been in the UFC now for 12 years, and like you say,
12 years.
Yeah, he's got a win. He's got a win over Sergio Pettis, the Bellator bantamweight champion. He's been in there with Yair Rodriguez. He's been in there with Uriah Faber. He's got a lot of experience for someone that's never quite made that step up to the. But a win over Sadiq Youssef isn't good. Youssef is ranked 12. Caceres is ranked 15, like you say, and I mean, a win over Sadiq Youssef doesn't do him any harm at all at this stage of his career. He'll be on a 6-fight winning streak, and he's still only 33, which he's certainly on the older side of featherweight because we've got all the young guns. Your Bryce Mitchells, your Arnold Allens, but this 33 is not old for, especially with his style. The karate kind of style. We've seen Stephen Thompson's one of the older guys at welterweight, and he's got the karate style, and it's on the most part, it's still working for him.
I wasn't ready for an Alex Caceres conversation today, but I'm welcoming it. This is great. So I think a lot of guys take hard knocks on their way to getting in the UFC, and then some guys take their hard knocks because they were in the UFC the whole time. And an example of that is Charles Oliveira. We see him float away when he loses sometimes. Well, everyone has those losses. His was just in a main event in the UFC, and he deserved to be there. Alex Caceres is probably the same thing. He's probably taken the worst losses of his career already. He's developed because of it. The problem is that we think of him as an average fighter because he took those losses on a like UFC on Fox main event slot kind of thing. Like we all saw you do that. Whereas other guys, like you take your loss in CFFC and no one cares. You take your loss in LFA, no one cares kind of thing. But yeah, we'll see what he does. Also on the card, there's not a ton of talking points. Who do we have? Borishev did really well with a good body punch and dropped Dakota Bush. Caitlin Chikadze won and then still hasn't been re-signed to the UFC. That was the last fight on her contract, and she's still not in the UFC. I'm sure it'll get resolved, but I can understand the UFC just being like, no, we're actually done. The whole division's gone. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, that's the thing with Caitlin Chikadze. I think that was the best win of her career without a doubt. I think she looked phenomenal. She was, it was picked up on the broadcast, but she was staying in the pocket for longer, looking for the finish. She was constantly on the ground. She dominated Jennifer Maia. And I think the way that she beat Maia was actually more dominant than the way the champion beat Maia. Completely different 5-round fight against a 3-round fight. A lot less pressure, yes, but she was more willing to stand in the pocket and trade. And, occasionally she did come off, you could see by her face, she did come off maybe not so well. And Jennifer Maia was able to land on her with, ease at points because she was so willing to stand in the pocket.
Yes.
It's difficult for her to deny her a title shot, really. But at the same time, I've got no real interest in seeing that again. It's a shame because I was thinking when the fight was on, she would be in my opinion, I think she'd be the flyweight champion if Valentina wasn't around. She's, I think, comfortably the best flyweight, other than maybe Jessica Andrade, because obviously Andrade has to win over her. But it's difficult for Chikadze because she doesn't have that fight style that makes you want to tune in and really watch her fight. If you look at the division, you've got Shevchenko up at the top on her own, and she's got to be going up for the 135-pound bout now because she's lapping the field. She's beat numbers 2, 3, 4, 5. She hasn't fought Talia Santos, no, but it's looking a bit dicey for Valentina as far as whether you can even make an argument. And it's not like the Amanda Nunes we've seen weaknesses in the gas tank before. We've seen her quit before. Valentina's got 2 losses in the UFC, both to Amanda Nunes.
Yeah.
Both of which you could, well, especially the second one, you could argue that she actually won that fight. For Caitlin Chikadze, I think if I'm Chikadze, I either ask for a Talia Santos fight because she's the only other girl that's on a sort of long winning streak in the flyweight division. I ask for the rematch with Jessica Andrade, or I'm looking at Andrea Lee because Andrea Lee's got 2 big wins this last year against Shevchenko and I think it's Calvillo when Calvillo, was pulled out on her stool. And a win over Andrea Lee for anyone, especially Caitlin Chikadze, who's got the style where now if she's willing to stand in the pocket a little bit more, I think that would make it for a real entertaining fight. But, Chikadze's on that kind of, she's that kind of position in the division and she's on that kind of win streak where she should be headlining events, but she just hasn't got the style to headline events.
Yeah, you would think someone like, let's say she's beaten half the top 10, she's beaten a bunch of the top 5, she's on a win streak now. You'd be like, oh man, she's some world beater on paper. And then you watch her fight and you're like, oh yeah, she's not beating Valentina Shevchenko. I'm surprised that she's winning the fights that she has won. I don't have much to say on Chikadze. I like her Twitter likes. She seems like a cool person that I would get on with pretty well. But other than that, I have no opinion. Yeah. Like this is the thing of like she's top 2 in her division, top 3 in her division, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't care.
Yeah, like like we just said about featherweight, any of the top 5 you could swap and change into a title fight. Chan Sung Young's ranked number 4 and he's getting a title shot. It's meant to be Holloway that's ranked 1. I'm now interested in seeing a Kattar versus Volkanovski fight after this weekend. I've no interest in seeing Chikadze lose to Shevchenko again. And that's with the greatest respect, because like you say, I think she's got a real good personality. I think she probably could sell a fight card if she had that kind of style, but she doesn't. It's as simple as that. It's risk averse. She doesn't take this fight aside. She doesn't take too many risks. she's got her own, you know, outside of the UFC, outside of fighting, sorry, she's got her own podcast. I think she's in the real estate business. You know, her husband is, you know, big into wrestling. So it's, you know, she's, what I'd say is if she walked away from the UFC now, if they didn't renew her contract, no one would kind of miss her, which is a shame because she's talented. She's very, very good. But it's not going to be a huge loss to, I don't know who's tuning in at least to see just Katlyn Chookagian fight. I am, because I love her style. I think she's really exciting style, and I like the way she fights. You know, she's solid on the ground. She can mix it in with the wrestling. You know, she's tall for the division. She has got the attributes to make Shevchenko struggle, but she can't. You know, it's on paper she should be able to challenge Shevchenko a little bit more than she did when they fought, but she, you know, as we saw, she was dominated, crucifixed, and pounded out.
It was one of the better performances, but yeah, that's the thing of like, she just doesn't square into anything that you would want her to square into for a top 3 fighter on a win streak. Anyway, are we ready? Anything else from the weekend before we can set the table for UFC 270?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty much it. You know, I have no interest in talking about Chase Sherman versus Jake Collier because it's that's as much as I want to sound it. It was Jake Sherman versus a heavyweight Jake Collier. That's all I want. That's all I can say on the mat.
Heavyweights outside of the top 15, might as well just go watch sumo. Like, you guys are lame. Just watch sumo wrestling. Okay, so UFC 270 this weekend. Let me set the table and then we can get to a technical breakdown. But we have at the top what Dana White has called the greatest heavyweight fight in UFC history. And he might have a point here. Ciryl Gane was a furniture salesman until he was 25 years old and then he got into Muay Thai fighting. He then, within 3 years, became the number 1 Muay Thai fighter at heavyweight. He had beaten the other fighters in that division. He was undefeated. Switched to MMA. He has a calm, a plodding, a smart, distant style. He's in MMA. He's an interim champion in the UFC. He's still undefeated. I am willing to say that Ciryl Gane might be the greatest striker in UFC heavyweight history. He has a diversity of strikes. He's a smart striker. And now he's fighting Francis Ngannou, a former training partner of his. They were sparring partners against each other in Paris, France. Francis Ngannou has the greatest story in mixed martial arts history. From growing up in a place where everyone said, you can't become an athlete, you can't become a boxer, you're not going to do anything, you're going to work in the sand mine. He went from the sand mine, traveling across the continent. He was homeless. He was arrested. He was everything. This guy was sleeping on the floor in the gym. He was sleeping in parking lots. Now he's a world champion. You have the greatest story in mixed martial arts history versus the greatest striker in mixed martial arts history. It's the kind of fights, a UFC heavyweight title fight, all the electricity, all of the prestige that comes with it. This is a great fight. On paper, in the cage, this is an absolutely great fight. I'm going to let you go ahead and do the technical breakdown. We'll go back and forth on this one a little bit because it's a great fight. But we'll get to it. Go ahead, Frazer.
Yeah, like you say, you know, you got maybe the greatest striker in Ciryl Gane, who I was watching a lot of footage, you know, last week and this week. I'd argue that he's not a heavyweight. Someone has just put like a lightweight or a welterweight, middleweight movement patterns on a guy who can't make that weight. You know, he shouldn't be able to move the way that he does. He's constantly, and it's not like, oh, you know, he's on his toes. Stipe Miocic in the second fight, I watched literally just an hour ago in the second fight with Francis Ngannou, he was on his toes, but for 80% of the fight, he was flat-footed when he was out of range. Ciryl Gane is on his toes for 100% of the fight, you know, and he's not a heavyweight. He shouldn't be able to move that quickly and move with that kind of sort of finesse as well. And you know, I've got an article coming out on Wednesday or Thursday. It's one that I'm actually really excited to release. It's Ciryl Gane's keys to victory with sort of a video analysis and mainly focusing on his defensive work because he doesn't get hit. I think the most strikes that were landed against him were when he fought Alexander Volkov. I think 100 odd strikes. I'll just double check that. I don't want to get it wrong, but you know, that's not a lot of strikes to be landed over 25 minutes against a striker and a top one, you know, one of the top heavyweights. Yeah, so it's total strikes Alexander Volkov landed 115, but you have to consider that it was 50-45 50-45 and 49-46 to Gane on all scorecards.
Yeah.
So regardless of the fact that Volkov landed, they weren't effective strikes. Clearly, you know, they weren't damaging strikes because Gane dominated the fight itself. And the keys to victory for Gane are, can he wear Ngannou out? And I think he's got the style that he can. You know, everyone's seen Ngannou land in. What I picked up on is he didn't seem to land clean. If you look at all of his knockouts, a lot of them are just from chaotic exchanges. The Rosenstruik knockout, that's just two massive heavyweights running to the center of the octagon, swinging with no great technique, either of them. And Ngannou was the first to land. The Alistair Overeem knockout, although, you know, it's highlight reel, absolute one of the knockouts of the year that year. His arms are swinging, he lands the uppercut, and then he lands the hammer fist, you know, or the hammer fist wasn't necessary, let's be honest, but it was a crazy knockout. It was a crazy knockout. The Cain Velasquez knockout, it was a strange where Cain sort of slipped, his legs went out, Francis was able to land on him. The Stipe Miocic knockout, you know, Miocic caught him, and then Miocic got excited, he ran in, and it was almost like a big power jab, and it was, you know, these are not clean exchanges where you land a slick 1-2 or like a, you know, just a knockout that everyone will know. McGregor Aldo, you know, McGregor slipped, pulled the hand down, and landed the left hand. These are not what Ngannou does. Ngannou lands in these chaotic exchanges. Gane doesn't get himself into these chaotic exchanges. He's too smart. He's too clever for that. And if he does, more often than not, he'll duck underneath and double under and work the clinch and push his opponent up against the fence. Now, even if he doesn't get the takedown, the threat's nullified from Ngannou if he's up against the fence with Gane sort of lying on him, you know, because you can't land in these chaotic exchanges. He's got to be careful on the break, but with his Muay Thai background, he's more than likely going to be switched on the break for the elbows, for the knees. But Ngannou is slightly one-dimensional as far as he's a boxer who occasionally throws in a high kick, and, you know, he's got phenomenal leg kicks we saw against Stipe last time out, but I couldn't tell you at the time that he's ever landed an elbow or a knee, you know. And whereas with Gane, you know, we see him land knees and elbows against Junior Dos Santos leading to the finish. So it's, for Gane, I think he's got to avoid the chaotic exchanges as best he can. And like Kattar and Chikadze this weekend, he's got to be either all the way out, where Ngannou's got to swing and you know, make up that distance, leaving himself open, or all the way in where his power is somewhat nullified. But then if he is going to go all the way in, he's got to be careful when he goes all the way in, because we saw with Stipe Miocic, you can't rush in, because Miocic did rush into Ngannou and got knocked out. So it's difficult, but I think the keys to victory for Gane are a lot more simple than the keys to victory for Ngannou.
Well, it's a matter of something that you did say. Now, I'm really excited to read the defensive techniques of Ciryl Gane later this week. This is going to be a good one. You got some video breakdowns in there as well?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Man, I'm excited for this one. We'll make sure to have it up on the socials because this is going to be a good one. But one thing we can only use footage of what fighters have done in the cage to measure what they're going to do in their next fight. A lot of people are using the ideas of, we've seen how much Francis Ngannou has been able to develop fight over fight, and especially going into the second Stipe fight. And yes, there have been a lot of improvements, but you can't extend that to say that he has a lot of improvements into now being able to do takedowns or controlling clinch or control top position, because we haven't seen it. I'm not saying that that isn't something that exists within his game. I'm saying we haven't seen it, so you can't go ahead and say like, oh no, he's adjusted. Eric Nixick and crew at Extreme Couture have adjusted a game plan. Yeah, they probably have, but you don't know that. And Francis Ngannou is a gentleman who excels in exchanges. He loves to exchange. And especially in his last fight, he had a tight, high guard. He almost was using like a peekaboo style guard where he's constantly pressuring against the opponent and waiting for the opening. He was pushing Stipe Miocic back. And he was learning a lot of things in this fight that I didn't realize that he didn't know. Listening to Eric Nixick on Luke Thomas's show, he was saying that he had to teach Ngannou of like cage control. So he would have to yell things of like, your cage. And then he would see Ngannou like circle back, make sure to control the center, because Ngannou didn't know how to do that. So he is developing a lot of stuff, but he's made it a huge amount of, he's made a lot of progress in the UFC for not understanding center control. But so now he's figured out center control. He's pressuring people back against the cage, but he excels in exchanges and he loves to exchange with people. And I think it's really easy to watch his entire like fight history, isn't it? It takes like 5 minutes overall because they're so quick. But there's not a lot that you can learn from these fights. Like you were pointing out of like, what if that Junior Dos Santos kept going? Probably the same thing would have happened. What if Cain Velasquez kept going? Probably would have been the same thing. The Rosenstruck knockout genuinely isn't good to watch. Like there's nothing to extrapolate from that knockout. Like
no technique or anything. It's just which big guy can land on the other big guy first, really.
It's not particularly interesting. All we can really get from this is that his lead left hook, which he's landed on Stipe, he's landed on Andrei Arlovsky, he can move it on a landing target and he lands it with authority. Those were the kind of the things that started it before he started doing the really big things. His lead left hook is really good. His timing and accuracy on the lead left hook are absolutely outstanding. And he likes to exchange. What I mean by this is when Andrei Arlovsky came in and did like a 1-2 to an overhand, most guys back away. Like you would imagine Ciryl Gane doing. Like, oh, he's throwing an overhand, so I'm going to back off or we're going to get out of distance. Francis Ngannou just stood there. And that's when he landed that massive uppercut on the inside, because I don't think Andre expected him like, oh, he's still standing exactly where he's still where he was initially, right? So he excels in exchanges, but can he get to those points where now we're exchanging in this fight? He tends to force exchanges just by, I'm now closing the distance. I'm now moving in against you. I don't know if he has the game to set up the feints, to do the stuff that he needs to do to get Ciryl Gane into exchanges. There's a few things that we've seen. Ciryl Gane is probably the greatest striker in heavyweight history, as we're going to see in your article. He's probably the greatest defensive striker in UFC history as well. And there's a few things that I've seen work against him, but there's not many things. He backs out of exchanges. He doesn't engage in exchanges. So how is he in exchanges? I don't know. We haven't seen it in the UFC either. We don't have footage on this. I assume he's good, but I can't say that for certain. There's a few things that he does really, really well. He does everything really, really well. The only weakness I've ever seen against him is against Alexander Volkov, where Volkov was landing the inside leg kick as a counter to the jab or as a counter to the leg kick, like what we saw in Fedor Emelianenko versus Mirko Kroka. He was using that leg cut to slice against the body kick. So you're kicking the back of the knee that's standing. And that was actually able to do really well. Can Francis Ngannou do that? He's thrown a few leg kicks in his entire career, and that was against Junior Dos Santos a few years back. I don't really know if he still has that game, but if I'm game planning, that's one of the things. The biggest advantages that Francis Ngannou has in this fight is that his training partners for this fight were Ciryl Gane. That's a pretty good training partner if you're getting ready for Ciryl Gane. And Rico Verhoeven, the greatest striker alive right now. My sparring partner is the greatest striker on earth at the moment. So if he's able to develop where his game was to where his game will be, even like a 50% growth with these people, with Eric Nixick, with Rico Verhoeven, there is a chance that he has game planned a way to victory, using inside leg kicks, finding a good way to close the distance and finding a way to get to the exchange points. Have we seen it? No, but it might exist. This is the thing of like, I'm struggling to not pick Ciryl Gane. In every like way I think about this, I'm like, I have to pick Ciryl Gane winning. I think he's the greatest fighter in the UFC heavyweight division right now. And this is why we make him fight. It's a fun fight. I'm wondering who's developed best since they were sparring 5 years ago in Paris, France. But yeah, Ciryl Gane all day, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we've seen, unfortunately for Francis, we've seen his weaknesses and we haven't seen Ciryl Gane's weaknesses. Like you say, we've got he's potentially susceptible to the leg kick from off the jab or off his own leg kick. But
yeah,
you know, that's maybe, you know, something that Volkov was able to do because of his kickboxing style.
Yeah,
Francis Ngannou hasn't got a kickboxing style. He's got a boxing style where he's quite heavy on the legs. And you know, not saying that Volkov's on his toes by any means, but his reactions time of, okay, he's throwing a leg kick or he's throwing a jab, I'm going to quickly fire the leg kick. Even if it doesn't land, I'm going to at least land with my foot, and it's going to, you know, it's going to keep him thinking that, okay, every time I've got a jab, I've got to be aware of maybe even lifting the leg up just straight after the jab. Now, that's not maybe something that we like, you know, I really like what you said as far as he could be, Francis Ngannou could be the best wrestler in the UFC. We just haven't seen it in the octagon. You know, everyone's a world champion. everyone's a world champion in training, but until you actually put it into practice, there's no proof of that. And
yes,
you know, it's important for Ngannou, I think, to, you know, when we go on to talk about Figueiredo and Moreno, to not be worried about losing a round or two. But that maybe not two, because, you know, I think if you lose 2 rounds against Ciryl Gane, it's a bit too late. But if he loses the first round, don't then panic and start rushing things, because that's when Ciryl Gane is just gonna potentially make you look quite silly, you know, like we saw with Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm, that big when Rousey rushed in and was obviously really quite anxious, really wanting to force the exchange or wanting to force the clinch. Holm ducked underneath, Rousey swung, fell to her knee, bounced back up, and, you know, Holm was then back out in space where she needed to be. Yeah. I think that's something that Francis Ngannou can do. That Ciryl Gane can do against Francis Ngannou, as far as frustrate him, you know, teep kick, leg kick, you know, pop the jab out there, pour away at his lead hand, force the big shot from Ngannou before slipping underneath and either grabbing the clinch like we've, you know, like I've seen him do in the Tate footage, or just pivot out, because his footwork is so good. The chances, I think, of Gane, seeing Gane with his back up against the fence, with Ngannou walking him down and corralling him to the cage, are fairly slim, I think. As far as, if, you know, let's say, just for argument's sake, this fight goes 25 minutes, I'd say no more than, you know, a minute or two per round is Gane going to have his back against the fence. These guys are going to meet in the middle, and Gane's going to try and use his superior footwork to get around. If he does get corralled up against the cage, that's when Ngannou can land.
Yeah, Gane does have that. One of my notes here is that he has footwork that I've seen bantamweights do, especially when you're pressured against the cage. Not just in the speed. He's, like you said, he moves like a welterweight. That's not even hyperbole. This guy is so fast. But his footwork ideas are ahead of any other heavyweights, where if you back me against the cage, fake one way, go the other way. Like, we're doing stuff that other heavyweights aren't developed to do. Guys at bantamweight are doing it, but guys at heavyweight are not. He's tactically ahead of everybody else. This is the thing of every time we're discussing it, we have hypotheticals of what Francis Ngannou could do, and all roads still lead to, like, well, Ciryl has to win. So here's the timeline on which Francis Ngannou wins. They get into an exchange and he knocks him out. That could happen within the first round, and we'd still come away with, like, yeah, but if it was 25 minutes, you know, Ciryl Gane probably beats him. Power is the great equalizer. Francis Ngannou only needs one punch, but I'm still picking Ciryl Gane all day. I think you hit the nail on the head with your analysis. Like, there's not a lot of routes to victory for Francis Ngannou. The way that Ciryl Gane does that, like, blade side on stance, and he has a long jab and he has a long teep kick, and you never know which one is coming. That is absolutely brilliant. He's refined a way of Muay Thai, which tends to be a little bit more all the way in and all the way out. It's translated extremely well to MMA for him, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think the Derek Lewis fight last time out for Gane is the perfect sort of, you know, fight to have for him before he fights Ngannou, because neither man are really going to, you'd assume, neither man's going to mix in a wrestling, a takedown exchange. Derek Lewis is a little bit more explosive with his kicks. You know, he's got these surprisingly quick and surprisingly flexible for such a big guy, but at the same time, you know, Derek Lewis is a boxer who fights in MMA, does land a leg kick, you know, that plodding style, as Ngannou is a little bit more on the feet, on the toes.
Yeah.
But still, it's the avoidance of the big rear hand from both men. And, you know, if you're Ciryl Gane, what better way to prepare for Francis Ngannou than to fight Derek Lewis, who is a big right hand, essentially, you know. Not to take anything away from either man's clinch game or ground game, but that is what their careers have centered around, is the big right hand. And,
yeah,
you know, he's gone the best part of 15 minutes, I think, with Derek Lewis, Ciryl Gane did. So, you know, and it's like you say, I think Ngannou, if he's going to win, he's going to land, and it's going to be early. I don't think, and, you know, it's something that I did think that probably will happen is strikes to the back of the head from Francis Ngannou, because, like you said, the side-on stance from Gane, and Ngannou going to be swinging both. You know, we've seen him swing both hands, and if Gane gets sort of stuck in that mid ground, because he's almost side on, you know, he almost stands with his shoulder, his left shoulder. He is a switch hitter, but you know, he almost stands with his left shoulder completely towards Gane. If Ngannou is throwing these big strikes over the top, he's gonna come, it's gonna hit, and if he doesn't get his head down, it strikes to the back of the head, which could, you know, cause a little bit of a stop in the fight, allowing Ngannou to sort of, you know, have a little bit of recovery time, which, you know, don't be surprised if you see that happen, especially later on in the fight as Ngannou gets maybe Ngannou gets maybe a little bit more desperate. But
yeah,
you know, I'm echoing what you're saying. I think, you know, I will be picking Gane in this fight probably by unanimous decision, because I don't think he's got that one punch knockout power. You know, we've seen him, all of his finishes thus far have been TKOs to the point where he's been constantly be able to land on his opponent. You know, like we saw against Derek Lewis, that wasn't a one punch knockout power. That was more, you know, I'm sort of just chipping away at Derek Lewis, chipping away. Okay, now I'll land a big strike. And Derek Lewis, I just don't think was expecting it. I think he was expecting just more of a sort of, you know, like a Max Holloway style of, I'll kill you with 1,000 paper cuts rather sort of style. But yeah, I think with Gane, like you say, it's key to victory to just land the big strike, but he's got to close the distance early. And he's got to land a big heavy leg kick. We saw against Stipe Miocic second time out that he was landing, you know, he's mixing in the leg kick service for slightly more, but he needs to land even more of those on Gane to limit that movement. And against Miocic last time out as well, he was landing, you know, sort of pumping out the fake jab to the full jab to the right hand. So it was, I wouldn't say it was a double jab right hand because it wasn't quite that quick, but it's sort of fake jab right hand, and it landed on Miocic fairly convincingly, and Miocic was able to sort of eat it. But at the same time, I don't think Gane's going to be there for, you know, as soon as you fake that first jab, Gane's going to either look to duck underneath or look to just get out of the way of it. And that's because, you know, I think he's a more intelligent striker than Miocic, and it's going to be I think it's going to be a long night for Ngannou if he doesn't land early.
I think so too, and I'm excited to see this fight. This is one of those. This is a good heavyweight fight. This is a great heavyweight fight right here, and I'm hoping, looking into the future, that we do see probably a trilogy, a second fight. I don't entirely know what the contract negotiations will look like. In the past, we used to just say like Lorenzo Fertitta will step in and then, you know, do the negotiations. I don't know what kind of state the UFC is in now with what they do, but do you think one of these gentlemen just keeping the belt warm for Tom Aspinall? Yeah.
You read my mind. I was literally just going to say that, which is, you know, they can have their 2022, but this time next year we'll be talking about Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane, and you know, it's lights out for Ciryl Gane. I'm afraid Tom Aspinall's going to steal that O away from him, and probably knock him out in under 10 seconds. But no, you know, like you say, it's in Gane's contract situation, especially, is very much up in the air. He's talks with Tyson Fury that need to just be put away before we even start them. That's just not entertain that as a thing. You know, it's fun to go back and forth on Twitter and whatnot, but let's put that to the, you know, let's close that drawer straight away before it even opens. But you know, I think depending on, you know, it's easy to say, oh, we'll definitely have a rematch, but depending on how the fight goes, you know, if it's a completely dominant win by either man, it's a tough sell for a third fight, for a second fight, sorry. But you know, if you look down the rankings, you've got, you know, obviously champion Ngannou, Ciryl Gane is the interim champion. So you could argue that the number two guy, then the number one or number two, whichever way you want to look at it, is Stipe Miocic. And, you know, he's 1-1 with Ngannou. He's never fought Gane. There's a potential there. And then you've got Derek Lewis, who is obviously coming off the loss. He holds a win over Ngannou, but that dominant loss to Ciryl Gane. You've then got Curtis Blades, who,
yeah,
realistically, he should be, you know, yes, he lost to Derek Lewis at the end of, or it's the beginning of last year, but, and then he's got the win over Rosenstruik. But, you know, these are hard sells. And then you've got, you know, Volkov, who's got the win over Tybura last time out. But then outside of that, you know, where are you going? It's all roads are leading to Tom Aspinall. It's you know, it's at the end of the day, you know, he's he's fighting again in March. We've potentially got the London card on March 19th. After that, he's got to be looking at top 5 really, because of the sort of state that the division's in at the moment. You still got Blago Ivanov in there and Sergey Pavlovich, and I couldn't tell you the last time Sergey Pavlovich competed, to be honest. I know he fought. I'm pretty sure he fought Alistair Overeem in his debut. Yeah, he's still ranked in the top 10 and he hasn't fought since 2019. Top 15. He hasn't fought since 2019. Walt Harris hasn't fought, hasn't won in a hot second. And
that's not it. That's not the one. Tai Tuivasa is on the brink of becoming a big top 10 on a little win streak. He's kind of
exactly, yeah. And Tai Tuivasa 4 in a row. He's got Derek Lewis in February. I think that's on the Whitaker Adesanya card. But then you've got Augusta Sakai still ranked in the top 10, but hasn't got a win. Hasn't got a win since Blago Ivanov in 2020, and the division is thin. I think if Aspinall beats, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Shamil Abdul.
Shamil.
yeah. Big Shamil, big Russian Shamil.
Big Shamil.
If Aspinall wins in March, I think he's got to be calling out. I know he's not really one to be calling out fighters, but he's got to look at either Volkov or Rosenstruik, because they're 2 fighters that will get him into the top 5. If you can't beat them guys, you won't be cracking the top of the division. And I think that's the way that the division's going at the moment. It's time for young blood to come through. Tai Tuivasa, Tom Aspinall. It's quite thin on the ground.
Ready for some new blood. Curtis Blades is the only interesting one because it's such an interesting style matchup. But Curtis Blades, we just kind of write like wrestler, and only wrestler in the division, but he's not that he's not as heavy top position as you're imagining wrestlers to be, right? Because even if I said okay, let's bring in 1999 Mark Coleman in, I'd be like, yeah, he's a better wrestler than Curtis Blades is. I would give 1999 Mark Coleman a better chance than I would Curtis Blades. And Curtis Blades he's good. He's definitely good. But you know what I'm saying?
He's still susceptible to being
punched.
Knocked dead. Ngannou's 2-0 against him. Derek Lewis knocked him dead with that big uppercut. And it's, he's people are seeming to telegraph his shots and do it with, I wouldn't say ease, but it's becoming easier and easier for people to telegraph these shots. Yeah. And Biggie Boy wasn't able to land on him when they fought last time out, but Derek Lewis was, and Derek Lewis is renowned for having a pretty poor wrestling game, and he was able to just nullify his poor wrestling game by just landing the mother of all uppercuts and putting Curtis Blades out. So it's going to be a rough night, I think, for Blades if Ngannou wins. Blades is certainly hoping that Ciryl Gane wins, because the third fight in Ngannou doesn't sell, especially after being 0-2 with 2 finished losses.
I co-sign with that entirely. Let's move from the biggest title in the UFC to the smallest title in the UFC. A third fight, a trilogy in which one man hasn't even won a fight yet. I feel like the UFC just did this fight because flyweight, there's no other names at flyweight, even though clearly there's a top contender. Askar Askarov deserves this rematch much more than Deiveson Figueiredo was. He already has a draw at Brandon Moreno, and he's beaten all the other top contenders. But no, we'll put the guy who lost convincingly back in there. I'm having trouble selling this fight. I just went back and read my own analysis for this fight. Like, what's going to be different going into this one? I know Figueiredo has changed camps and stuff like that, but I'll quickly set the table on this one. Brandon Moreno was able to take the successes that he had in their first fight going to their second fight and really just amplify it. In the same way that we saw Frankie Edgar versus BJ Penn, he took the small successes from the first fight and amplified it in the second fight. He was choosing the exchanges to engage in. He was leading the dance. He was constantly using pressure against Deiveson Figueiredo. He was using his jab to control everything. He was using jab feints, power jabs, light jabs. He was using combination jabs to control everything and absolutely shut down the game of Deiveson Figueiredo. And then used better grappling to... It was just like that fight, everything was hitting on point. Jussier Formiga probably set the stage on how you want to beat Deiveson Figueiredo. And that was just really pressure this guy. It's like pressuring the kicker, but you're pressuring the guy who's a power striker. Don't give him any space, force the exchanges out of him, and then you're choosing the exchanges on which you want to engage in. Brandon Moreno, like his corner said in between rounds, his corner said, jab, jab, jab. You need to jab more. And that's like what going to this fight. I think this is a good win for Brandon Moreno, and he's going to make more money from this fight than he would from Askar Askarov. But yeah, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, on my notes, I put Moreno pump the jab,
Pump the jab
out and get it into scrambles. He needs to pump that jab like he did, like he did in the second fight. Is Figueiredo can't set up any huge strikes if he's constantly got something in his face and he's constantly having to move his own head and constantly having to, either pour away at the jab, try and slip the jab, or just having the jab land on him. And even if that jab isn't landing, directly on his head, if I'm Moreno, I'm pumping the jab even to the chest. Like we heard, but maybe one of the best works of corner piece I've ever heard is Matt Serra with Chris Weidman against Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
Punch a hole in his effing chest, and that's what Moreno needs to do, is just constantly pump that jab out. And if it lands in the chest, it lands in the chest, but it's going to keep Figueiredo thinking, I've got to, and mix in a leg kick. Don't be scared to go high with the leg, because we saw Moreno was dominant on the floor against Figueiredo last time out. Obviously, it finished rear naked choke, and he needs to get into these scrambles, because these scrambles are going to wear Figueiredo out. He's notoriously not got a brilliant gas tank. We have seen him fade in both fights with Moreno, and that's because I think he believed that maybe he didn't believe that Moreno was sort of worthy of being in there with him. I'll go in there, I'll finish it off early, and I'll move on to the next contender. Now he needs to stay calm in this one and don't load up and don't look for the knockout. And like Ngannou, if he needs to take the second or third round off, if he's so let's say they're 1-1 after the first and second round, the third round he could probably take off to conserve that energy, so when he gets into the championship rounds, he's got something left. Because we saw a lot of the success that Moreno had, although it's because, like we say, he was pumping the jab and constantly keeping busy, it was also because Figueiredo was tired. He was fatigued in that fight, and that, I think, came as a result of him sort of being very tense and loading up on his strikes. And despite the fact that the first fight went the distance, I think the second fight told us a lot more about each fighter. Yes, they didn't go for so long because the fight ended in the third round, but we saw Moreno's output. In the first round he landed 28 of 57 strikes, whereas Figueiredo only landed 7. And then the second round was a lot closer, 23 for Moreno, 21 for Figueiredo. And then the third round, where the finish came, 20-5 in favor of Moreno. But first round, no takedowns for any man. No one was mixing in takedowns. Second round, 1 for each. Third round, 1 for Moreno. And you can just see the control times. Moreno was able to control it for just over 3 minutes in the second round, just proving his sort of dominance on the floor. And he is the smaller guy, I think, out of the two. Figgy certainly cuts more weight to get to 125. But it's in the sort of crazy scrambles, a bit like, a little bit like Ngannou in the crazy exchanges and the chaotic exchanges, where Moreno does some of his best work in these scrambles and is able to get to the back or able to land on the break. And he needs to do that again against Figueiredo. And, like you say, I think Askar Askarov, it was the fight to make. But they made the Figueiredo fight for whatever reason. I think maybe they made the Figueiredo fight knowing that it would be a co-main event, and it could potentially, let's say, touch wood and hope that it doesn't, but let's say there's a COVID issue with the main event. Figueiredo sells a pay-per-view better than Askar Askarov.
No doubt.
And, there's from my understanding, I don't think there's any of the heavyweights on this card. Yeah, so there's no other heavyweight fights on this card. So we did have Greg Hardy versus, first of all, Alexei Olenek, and then Greg Hardy versus Sergey Spivak. But I mean, even they couldn't have stepped in for a title shot. But you still get where I'm coming from. If the title fight falls out, Figueiredo sells a lot better than Askar Askarov.
Yeah, he does.
So maybe that was, they were sort of putting the contingency plan in place there. And it's like you say, it's difficult to see how Figueiredo makes that big an improvement from their last fight, because that was only in June, so we're only talking realistically best part of 6 months. Yes, he's got a new team, but there's only so much that a new team can do for a fighter. We saw Zhang Weili go and train with Henry Cejudo's team.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't quite work out for her. It worked out better because she was certainly more competitive, but she lost the fight still.
Yeah, and a new team. So his style was very Takanori Gomi, blitz in, blitz out. I'm going to throw the hardest punches I possibly can. I'm going to close the distance just by leaping at you. And it was a great style, and it's a super fun style to watch. But yeah, a new team would almost tell him to not play to his strengths. But they're going to have to, pretty much the same conversation that we have with Francis Ngannou, of like, you're going to have to work for openings rather than forcing openings to happen. And maybe he's made those improvements, but yeah, it's a fun fight. I'll watch these two fight back and forth forever. But it's kind of a weird thing, because I was just like, if Cejudo came back, does he beat these guys? If Demetrius Johnson was back, does he beat these guys? Like, even today, like, it's a kind of a weird title fight where I'm still like, I don't know. There's other guys who maybe are better than the champion.
Yeah, well, when we always consider, these are the best two guys on, UFC, Ciryl Gane or Ngannou are the best heavyweights on the planet.
No doubt.
We look at Israel Adesanya or Robert Whittaker, one of those two best middleweight on the planet, best lightweight on the planet at the moment. Charles Oliveira, maybe Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
Featherweight, Volkanovski. Yeah, but is it Max Holloway? These are all questions. But then the fact that you're now looking outside, like miles out, we've got AJ McKee in Bellator, and outside of that, I think, and Kayla Harrison. But outside of that, I think the UFC have got the best fighters on the planet at all weight classes, apart from at flyweight, where, like you say, it might be Henry Cejudo who is retired, supposedly. We've got the back and forth this weekend. It might be Demetrius Johnson. So it's a weird one, because, like you say, so are they keeping the belt warm for Cejudo if he does come back? Are they keeping the belt warm for Johnson? Okay, Johnson's probably never going to come back to the UFC, but hypothetically speaking, are they keeping the belt warm for Johnson, who could come back to the UFC? We always had the question, Ben Askren is probably the best welterweight, could potentially be the best welterweight in the world. Undefeated, coming into the UFC, came into the UFC, putting on a dreadful performance against Robbie Lawler, knocked out by Jorge Masvidal, dominated pretty much by Damian Maia. So that put that debate to bed. There's no debate. Ben Askren was potential. He had a lot of potential, but he never quite lived up to that potential in the UFC, at least. Whereas, Henry Cejudo and Demetrius Johnson, we know that they can live up to that potential because they have done. And it's, it's a hard sell for, I think even, the Askar Askarov, if he wins, or the Kai Kara France, I think the UFC are kind of hoping that Kai Kara France wins that one, because he's a better talker, and he sells a lot better than Askar Askarov, and he can sell on an Adesanya undercard or a Robert Whittaker undercard with that sort of Australasian fan base of his. And you can start the fight with Australasian fans. Now, I think that probably, in my opinion, it's a new fight as well. It's brand new. We haven't seen it before, which, like you say, they fought to a draw last time. If Moreno's going to win this one, he fought to a draw with Askarov. But with that being said, I'd watch the Kai Kara France fight. He's got power now that we've seen against Cody Garbrandt, and that excites me a little bit more than an Askar Askarov fight, despite the fact I think Askar Askarov's probably the slightly better fighter.
It's funny. We're just going to get into the big history here, which is really where we want to. But UFC didn't have a lightweight division. Now, it's hard to imagine the UFC without a lightweight division, because it's the premier division of the UFC. When they brought back the lightweight division, it was pretty good. Like BJ Penn and Jens Pulver. This is when they brought it back. Not the first time they tried it. They tried it once and it messed it up. So they tried it a second time. Within 10 years, we went from BJ Penn to Conor McGregor. Pretty great 10 years. Now with the flyweight division, we've had it for like 10 years. And the UFC still hasn't made that kind of progress where, like, We've given it time to develop. There's nobody here. What is going on with the UFC flyweight division? Even bantamweight, absolutely filled out. Featherweight, super filled out. Lightweight, the best division in the UFC. Flyweight, it's been 10 years. What is going on here?
Yeah, that's the thing, and like we said earlier on, featherweight, plenty of contenders. Bantamweight, we're always got banging on about how many contenders are at bantamweight. Lightweight, I think the star power names in there speak for itself.
Yep.
Welterweight, we haven't even had time, and I don't think we will have time today to talk about the announcement of Masvidal versus Covington. That might have to be an extra show later on in the week, just a sort of 10-minute breakdown on that. But
sure, I'll make it quick. Who cares?
Okay, yeah, exactly. In my opinion, and we put a poll up on the Sucka Instagram, Covington wins that and wins it fairly easily. Masvidal hasn't got a decent gas tank. Covington has got a phenomenal gas tank, can mix in the wrestling. Masvidal doesn't really hit hard enough to cause Colby Covington any problems. Done. It'll be the build up. I'm much more excited for the build up to that fight than I am the actual fight itself. But like going back to the point is the top division and the bottom division, the heavyweights and the flyweights. Mm-hmm. Outside of these two fights, what is there? We're struggling to find another contender for potentially Ciryl Gane or potentially Francis Ngannou. We're struggling to find, although we've got the next contender, it's either going to be Kai Kara France or Askar Askarov. Could you argue that Kai Kara France isn't actually deserving of a title shot after this one? Because, although, yes, he got the big win against Cody Garbrandt, and then he got that strange win against Bontarin where it was, kind of knocked him out and then kind of knocked him out again. He will be on a 3-fight win streak, but Askar Askarov is on a 14-fight win streak, give or take the draw against Moreno. He should be the one getting the title shot. And we've still got Alejandro Pantoja, 2-fight win streak, highly ranked on it's on Tapology. But then you go further down the rankings, Alex Perez is still in there, but he's coming off a loss to Figgy. And then you got Brandon Royval, who yes, he won this weekend, but he's 3-2 in the UFC. And you've got your boy Manal Cape, who he's on a 2-fight win streak now, 2 finishes, but they haven't been up against the sort of upper echelons of the division, really. He's got good wins, and they are good wins, but he needs that sort of more, I think, standout name. He needs the Brandon Royval. He needs even the, I'd watch Manal Cape against pretty much anyone in the division, but he needs a name, even if it's I'm going down the divisions now, and it's
bad. It's worse than heavyweight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very thin, and I'm looking down, and there's no one really that Manal Cape, Brandon Royval maybe gets, because it's a slightly bigger name, but outside of that, it's the only other person that hasn't got a fight booked is Alejandro Pantoja, but they've already fought and Manal Cape lost, so it's the division is rough, but that's maybe it's the first card of the year, and they're sort of almost getting maybe they're getting those 2 fights kind of almost out of the way, so the 2 divisions can materialize for the rest of the year. And then they've got they're starting again. You start fresh next year with potentially you got a Mohamed Mokaev who's potentially maybe by this time next year he's 3-0 in the UFC, and he's looking at his way to a title shot, which is crazy to think, but that's the potential.
I guess, but yeah, it's just there's not much going on here. Heavyweight, I know, is always thin, but it comes with enough prestige at the top that you can kind of get away. And the champion's usually super cool and super fun. There's some good history there. Flyweight, after 10 years of development, just is probably at a worse position than it has been in the UFC. But yeah, I don't know. So for the rest of the UFC 270 card, there is some pretty banger fights. What is your sleeper fight on this one? What are the one that you're saying, like, make sure to check this one out as well?
Yeah, so I've got a piece coming out. It'll come out either later today or tomorrow. Just three under the radar fights, I think, because because you've got the 2 title fights. There's a lot of fights on this card that are going, like I say, under the radar. But Cody Stamann versus Saeed Nurmagomedov, phenomenal fight. We haven't seen Nurmagomedov for almost 2 years now.
Yep.
Big test for him to see if he can actually make that sort of transition from lower card to higher. Although Stamen isn't ranked, he has been ranked in the past. He's got some big wins. And he's experienced within the UFC, so that should be a good one. I've also put Vanessa Demopoulos versus Sylvia Juarez. That's both of these ladies. I think it's going to be a good fight because they're both 0-1 in the UFC, but they will be looking for that win. Demopoulos has had a chance twice before. She had a chance on the Contender Series where she lost to Wales' Corey McKenna, and then she came in on short notice against JJ Aldrich. Juarez is 0-1 in the UFC, and she I think she stepped in on late notice against Lupi Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And lost in the first round via armbar. But I think that one, Demopoulos has got a style that I think could cause Juarez problems. But at the same time, neither of these women are ranked so too highly. But it was meant for last weekend's weekend's card just gone, but it's been rescheduled for this card. And finally we got Charles Jourdain versus Ilia Topuria.
That's a good one.
It's the late notice of Charles Jourdain coming into this fight is what makes it so interesting, because if you remember, his last fight was against Andre Ewell, and it was a phenomenal fight and a phenomenal performance. He absolutely battered Ewell and was unlucky not to get him out of there, to be honest. And Topuria, we know what to expect from him. He's 11-0. I think the Mosvar Evelev fight was more interesting, but also, it is what it is. At least he's still on the card with a fight. And outside of those three fights, we've got the return of Kay Hansen, who's like Kevin Holland, one of the UFC fighters with an OnlyFans, although it's slightly different to Kevin Holland's from what I imagine.
Well, we'll get back next week. We'll sign up to both. We'll get back to you guys.
Rodolfo Vieira returns after he bounced back from that loss to Anthony Hernandez, and the always exciting Michel Pereira, although he's got a late notice opponent. I'm already excited to see him, just his ring walk alone, let alone his fighting style. So UFC 270, although it's had a lot of cancellations and a lot of bout changes, it's still a very good card.
Absolutely, I co-sign with that. That Warley Alvarez Adolfo Vieira fight was the one that stuck out, and the Saeed Nurmagomedov. Absolutely, those are all really good fights. I don't think there's anything else.
Warley Alvarez is off the fight now, isn't he?
No. Wait, who's filling it? Who's filling it?
Waller Alves is the fight is now. I think it's a couple of double cancellations, but it's now Jack Maddalena versus Pete Rodriguez. To be honest, I can't pretend that I know a lot about Pete Rodriguez, but he's 4-0 with 4 finishes.
Fine.
All of which have come in the first round for Icon Fighting Federation as well. So it's not like it's yes, it is a local kind of promotion, but it's a well-respected promotion out of Mexico, and he's got a win in 10 seconds, a win in 41 seconds, and he's never gone over 2.5 minutes. So expect, don't blink for that one, because he's got a style. He's only 25, and he's got a style clearly that he enjoys knocking people cold.
Yeah, that's okay. So he might be one to keep an eye on for the rest of the year if things go swimmingly this weekend. UFC 270 this weekend, and there's not a lot of other MMA events this weekend that we need to cover off. I think that it was very this is a heavyweight title fight coming in, and there wasn't much else surrounding it. We will be back next week, folks, and we'll cover off how correct we were. We're going to pat each other on the back for another hour next week. Just like, wow, Ciryl Gane, wow, he's so good, just like we said. No, we're going to talk about how we were incredibly wrong, probably.
Ciryl Gane's going to come out and wrestle Gane and show the best footwork I've ever seen, and it's going to be embarrassing for us, I think.
Man, I'm so excited. This is such a banger of a fight. There's some kickboxing going on this weekend. Jorge Masvidal's got a thing this weekend. There's a grappling event this weekend, LFA. It's not an insanely heavy weekend that we're seeing in MMA. UFC 270 this weekend. Make sure to stick to MMA Sucka. We have some articles coming out later on. My name's Tim Wheaton with Tim Wheaton MMA. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram. Frazer Krohn at Frazer Krohn Writing. Make sure to check him out on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us on MMA Sucka Instagram. That's probably the best place where we'll have all of our article updates throughout the week and going forward. Frazer, last word, where can the people find more of you?
Yeah, so like I said, like Tim says, we'll be all over the MMA Sucka, the website this week. There's plenty going on, although, like Tim alluded to, there's not an awful lot outside of the UFC. we broke down the UFC card there and given some fights to watch. There's plenty on that card alone just to sort of focus on. We'll be there with news every day. And we're putting a lot more sort of emphasis on the Instagram side of things. So MMA_Twitter on Instagram is going to be popping off a lot this week, especially with what's going to come out as far as breakdowns and rumored fights and confirmed fights. I'm sure there'll be plenty of that this week. So yeah, keep it locked.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.